This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning to Teachers Talk Radio on Saturday the 5th of February with me, Zoe Enser. Today we're going to be exploring how we can ensure those CPD events have a lasting impact, and I'm really pleased that I'm going to be joined by my special guest, Amjad Ali. And if you've got any thoughts on this, how can we make sure CPD matters? Text in.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. And
You
every time, it doesn't matter how many times I do that little tech tip that I've been told, to make sure that doesn't happen every single time it decides to do it. Hopefully we won't have many more technical issues today. I'll try that again. Hello, I hope that everyone today is well and that you're having a nice relaxing Saturday morning. I was hoping for some sun down this way. We've had a few sunny days. A few sunny days this week, which I've really enjoyed down in Sussex, but it's still a little bit grey out there today. So maybe this afternoon we'll get a few more glimpses of sunshine. It does change the way that you feel about the world. It does change how, those lighter nights and longer days and feeling a bit warmer. But at the moment, I'm absolutely freezing. Thank you to those people who have joined into the studio, a loyal follower, I'm really pleased to say. Morning, Mark. So today I am going to be discussing about, CPD again. As I've said all the way through, this is a bit of my obsession. I think it's something that hasn't gone well for us in the past, and that's internationally, and there's a wealth of research out there as to the problems that have gone on with CPD and why it's not making a difference to what we're doing in the classrooms. And that's what we want. We don't want to waste our time on activities and thinking and approaches which aren't going to make a difference to the students that we're working with. And as I've said from the start, this isn't something that's necessarily gone well. And if you're anything like me, you will have experienced sessions which have literally kind of gone in one ear and out of the other. And you've sat there and it's been, arranged for somebody to come in from outside. And, they might have a wealth of expertise. But by the time I've walked away from that at the end of the session, half of what I've learnt or meant to have learned in that particular area seems to have left me. And it doesn't matter, those sessions may have been really interesting. They could have been incredibly informative. As I've said, the speaker might have had a huge amount of expertise that they were bringing along and were really engaging. But if I was going back and I was thinking, well, actually, what I really need to spend my time on now is marking books. And that was a very hot topic earlier this week on Twitter. If I need to actually not worry about any of that, and I'm going to focus all of my time on making sure all of my books are marked, or if I'm worried that I haven't done an aspect of planning and that particular session wasn't relevant to what I'm going to be doing in my next lesson, or indeed if I'm thinking about the 105 other things, I finished that school day, that inset day, and I'm thinking of 101 other things that I need to do, then I'm just not going to be using it. And by the time I come back to that, I'm thinking, well, was that relevant? Have I got time to embed it? And very often those sessions are lost. If you have experienced similar, I'd really like to hear from you. Or indeed, if you've heard the opposite, if this is just me being Mrs. Negativity about some of my experiences, if you've had fantastic opportunities and fantastic sessions and you've found particular ways to make sure that has had an impact going forward, then do text in or call and let me know your thoughts about it. It's not just me rambling today. And I am really excited because I'm going to be joined a bit later by Amjad Ali and Amjad. He's been renowned as a CPD provider. He travels all over. He's also a teacher, and I'll let him talk in a bit more detail about that. So that isn't a case of it, that's what he does day in, day out. But he's got a wealth of experience around this, and I'm really interested to see, well, how can we make sure that those sessions where we've got somebody wonderful like him coming in are really making a difference to what's going on. It was interesting that this also came up in as part of the CPD chat, which was going on Wednesday. If you're on, if you're on Twitter and you're interested in CPD, I really recommend that you follow EdCPD chat. They do a live tweeting discussion every fortnight on a Wednesday at 7:30. And RJ McDonald, he was fantastic in helping set that up, and now it seems to be quite self-sustaining. I'm sure there's lots going on in the background, but other people come along and host it and present different ideas around CPD, and people talk about that for the half an hour. But you can always go back, and I always find something really interesting when that discussion comes up, and something that takes me in a different direction. And this week it did, even though the key discussion was about a blog post from Sandringham Research School. It came up with this idea, this point about, well, what do we do with those sessions, those big sessions, those event CPDs, I suppose, and how do we make a difference? And there were some real little gems that came out of that, of what people were doing to make sure that it made a difference. Marcus said, I'd be really interested about providers turning down schools when asked to provide CPD. How often do people say, sorry, that is outside of my area of expertise? Keep stumbling across people offering CPD in things they seem to know nothing about. That's a really interesting one, and certainly I've experienced it. I've had people that have approached me and said, would you be able to come and work on this? Would you be able to present on this? And my boss is like, yes, absolutely, yes, you can go and present on that. And I will often push back and say, am I the right person for it? Is there somebody else that we can connect them to who might be better to deliver this, have got more experience or knowledge around it? And so, certainly from my experience, I having kind of been through the situation in schools where I've sometimes been in sessions and thought, well, I'm not sure about the expertise here, and I'm not sure how it relates to me. I think I'm incredibly mindful of that. And I'm, if somebody says to me, could you come and deliver something on this aspect of the primary curriculum, or how about coming and doing something on DT, Zoe? Really, I'm not going to be doing that, and I do push back. Mark's got a question for Andy that I must remember comes up. What's the weirdest thing that he's been ever asked to deliver on in terms of CPD? And that would be an interesting one. And also, could you come and do some CPD? We don't mind what it's on. Yes, and I think that kind of brings me back to my thinking around this. And my thinking around this and the way I approach it is that I always start with trying to get as much in-depth information about the school. I'm very aware that I'm coming in from a context that might be very different to their experience, and every school is different. Even if you think there are a huge amount of commonalities, and there are some key commonalities, but regardless, even if it's the school that was just up the road from where I taught for 14 years, they would have certain differences with their community, certain differences with their teachers, their systems, their setup, where their staff are in terms of their understanding. And so I always start that process by trying to get as much information from the school as possible. And that's really tough, I find sometimes. I'm going to be talking a lot from my personal experience. I find that really challenging because often it's a half an hour Zoom conversation as opposed to actually going into the school and seeing what's happening on the ground. And you tend to rely on one or maybe two people to really have an in-depth understanding of exactly what their school needs. And absolutely excellent leaders have that. They have that understanding. But I'm trying to gather as much understanding around that as possible from them in that really short space of time. And I'm always keen to understand why they've selected this particular topic and how it fits within their overview of curriculum. And I've talked before about the fact that sometimes historically there hasn't really been an overview of the CPD curriculum and the ideas around it. And I think that comes back to the, I'd love you to come in and just deliver some CPD, because there are some really harassed CPD leads out there, or senior leaders who are responsible for that. And I know I was one for for a few years there. And all of a sudden, you've got this session or this inset day, and people saying, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had X in, or wouldn't it be nice if we had Y in, or we need something different. We want to liven staff up. We want to give them an opportunity in a sense that there's something different there. Personally, I would much rather that we develop something in-house and we gave staff lots of time to explore an idea together, maybe drew on some of the resources that are cheaply or freely available out there. I'm probably doing myself out of huge amounts of work here by saying this, but I'd perhaps rather draw on that. And if I was going to invest the money, I'd want to invest on a really nice lunch for the staff, um, some decent coffee, as opposed to the slightly dusty instant at the bottom of the jar, and create the conditions for them to feel that they could develop in that time, and then the time and space going forward in order to do that. And as I say, I'm probably not going to be again popular with my boss. But because I'm saying this, or maybe with other providers, it'll be interesting to know what Amjad feels about this. But having held that kind of CPD budget purse strings, I'm thinking carefully all the time about what's going to be the most appropriate use of that, and how can I make sure that it becomes embedded. If I think it's important, and teachers and the school leaders feel it's important, how can we make a difference? So I've got this really short, small window, about 30 minutes or so, where I'm talking to a school leader and I'm trying to establish, where does this fit? Why is this your priority? What do your staff already know about it? And I think that's a big gap as well. And there's nothing worse than standing in a hall of 100 teachers and being told that, oh no, that they've never encountered any of this before, or they're really familiar with it, and they know everything about it. So we want you to go much, much deeper. We want you to kind of take that in a different direction with that, and we want you to really go heavy in on the research that lays underneath it. And then you're looking at this sea of faces, and as you talk to the people who are involved, you're realizing actually that initial assessment wasn't quite as clear. So, I want leaders to be really honest with me when we're talking about that, and to maybe even, if there is time allowing, to go away and just check some of those ideas they've got. Check in terms of, where are our teachers at, and why are we choosing this? Why are we looking at metacognition? Why are we looking at questioning? Why do these matter for our school? And what problem are we trying to fix? And so I'm kind of doing that from a distance and remotely, and not being there on the ground and with the teachers and talking to them. And that can make that really challenging. The other thing, kind of coming back to my first point about these CPD sessions, where they might be fantastic and you might feel really inspired and motivated. But I recall seeing or hearing David Weston talk about this a few years back at Research Ed, and it being kind of akin to going shopping. You go to these wonderful events, and it could be, a Saturday conference that you've gone to, and you've given up your own time for that as well. So that's a slightly different slant on it as well. And you go to the event, or you go to the inset session, and somebody delivers this really inspiring presentation about how, I don't know, we could all be using different colour hats in our lessons or whatever. And we go to those sessions and we feel really good about it. But he made this kind of connection with going shopping, and you've picked up all of these lovely, wonderful ingredients off the shelves that look really beautifully wrapped and appetizing and interesting, and that's going to be fantastic. But unless you go home and create something with those, unless you make a meal and actually take the time to prepare what's needed to prepare and set the scene and all of those other things, then that shopping trip would have been largely a wasted shopping trip. And I always that's kind of stayed with me hearing him say that, and it really stays with me when I'm talking to schools about potentially delivering something for them. They're picking me up off the shelf. They're I'm in their shopping cart. They've decided they like some things about what I've said. They've read blogs by me or they've seen me present, and they're really keen for me to come and talk to their staff about that aspect. But I want them to be really sure that when I leave, that's going to have had an impact, and that they can make sure that that goes forward, that it isn't just something that stays there in that day and people will say, oh, you remember when Zoe Enser came in? Yeah, that was a day that I didn't teach, and could have been doing something else, or that was a day where she was all right. I want it to make a difference, and all the time, it comes back to what's the purpose of it, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and how can we really make sure that it isn't just one or two staff that benefit from that if we put on that kind of event, but that everybody can potentially benefit for that. Or indeed whether, we say, perhaps we don't need this, perhaps this isn't the approach that we would go for. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you want to text or call in, I'd love to hear your voices and know what your thoughts are around that. I'm always aware as well that I focus a lot on secondary. It tends to be secondary schools that ask for me to come and to work with them, although I have had some primary schools that I've worked with, and certainly I work with primary teachers in different ways. And kind of the courses I run, I may well have primary teachers that are involved with those. But it is again an area that I'm not always sure, how does this translate back? How does that make a difference to what's going on there? There's a comment on Twitter. Boss Tom Rogers tells me, certainly important to talk about to the school about the individual needs is essential. I totally agree. And if we don't do that, if we just go, oh, that's going to be nice, I can come to your school, I can have a look round, meet everybody, do my spiel, say what I have to say, that wouldn't sit well with me. I don't think I'd feel comfortable having taken people's money, having taken people's time, and I think for me it's almost always more about the time and the fact that there are however many teachers that are sat in a hall, that very, very valuable time. We know they don't ever have enough. I want to make sure that it makes a difference, and that time isn't wasted, and that's really important. And and okay, it's good sometimes. I've been a bit negative, I think, here in terms of it. It is good to hear from other voices, and I think that's often why when we try to bring people into our schools from outside and draw on their expertise, we want to hear a different voice. That it can feel sometimes that you've got the same people who are standing up in staff meetings or inset sessions or twilights, and it can be the same people, and it gets a little bit insular. So hearing that range of voices, hearing from people who are coming in from outside, can change our thinking and disrupting our thinking. I think again that's a term that sounds a little bit negative, but I quite like that opportunity to have my thinking disrupted a little bit and challenged. And I might be grumpy initially. I might fold my arms and go, well, they clearly don't know what they're talking about, because I know my school and they don't know my school, and I know my lessons and I know what goes on there. But even if I might initially be grumpy, then I will go away and have a think about that, and consider it and reflect on it and come back to that. And I think that is quite essential. Else you do end up getting quite caught in your own habits. You get that this is why I kind of read and write about education, because it's so easy to get caught in these loops. And some of those loops, it's absolutely fine. It's not a case of change for change's sake, but it does come back to this idea that we always want to do better for the young people that we're working with. And CPDs are opportunity to develop that further and to take it further. So seeing that kind of alternative approach and hearing something different again is useful. And well, certainly again from my perspective. And I'm sure that there are others again out there who will have heard things that have inspired them. We see it a lot with the online sharing, and I think there was a real kind of boon to that during the lockdown period, where we had lots and lots of videos suddenly appearing, lots of freely available sharing. We were becoming more adept at using the technology and making kind of recordings of ourselves and showing how things went in lessons. And all of a sudden that opened the doors for some people. Obviously, that relies on you having that access and having that time to do that. But I think it did kind of open our eyes and open our doors. And as I said, I'm really hoping to learn a lot about what's going on, or how to make the most of this. Amjad has been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and he talks in terms of the thousands of teachers that he's worked with, and I know that he does deliver on quite a few different areas as well. And so again, I'm going to be really interested to hear what he has to say in terms of how he makes a difference and what's going on there. And it was, I asked him to come on particularly, not only because he's pretty fabulous, but I remember seeing a sort of tweet from him a while back, and it could have even been a few years ago, but he'd created a performer which was there for kind of teachers and schools to use in relation to his CPD sessions, and gave them a prompt and an opportunity to look at what they were doing in preparation for that and what they were going to do after the sessions and how they were going to take it forward. And it was a bit more than just simply saying, and what are your next steps? And I know I can sometimes fall a little bit into that trap when I lead CPD, and it does that. Oh, I've got a call. Oh, somebody called in. I just about caught it there. If you want to call back in, I would love to hear from you. It may well be Amjad himself, but the name wasn't familiar there. So if you do want to call back in, I will try to be a bit quicker off the mark there. But I fall into that trap myself a little bit of saying, what are your next steps? Oh, Joe says Patrice Bain, the wonderful, amazing Patrice, did that at Research Ed. Again, tell me a little bit more about what she did, because I didn't catch her session. We had a selfie opportunity, but I didn't get to see her session. So I'd love to hear a little bit more of that. There we go. Hello. Let's see who I've got joining me now. I've got a caller that's joining me. Hello.
Hi Zoe, it's Amjad. How you doing?
It is fantastic. I saw the little handle there, and I wasn't sure who was joining
I'm not
me.
sure what handle I'm in either. I don't know.
CNSD.
NF. I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely that you've joined me this morning.
Thank you so much for
Really.
having me.
Oh no, I'm looking forward to learning from you really this morning, and I've been sort of discussing and exploring my experience of people coming into schools and kind of thinking about it from the point of view of that teacher. And I said, with my arms slightly folded and thinking, well, what do you know about my school, and what's your expertise? And I wasn't always terribly grumpy, but I do make myself sound a little bit grumpy when I talk in those terms. But also then from that position of the CPD provider and schools calling me and asking me to come in, and me being really mindful that I want it to impact. And I know that's something that you've talked and I've seen you write about as well. And that idea that you really want to make a change and make a difference.
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of the skepticisms about external CPD people, consultants, trainers, whatever you want to call them, trainers, is that how cost effective is it getting someone in to speak to your team for a day or for a few hours or half a day or whatever, and kind of what's the benefit of that? And ultimately, it comes down to the word that applies to pretty much every principle in education, which is leadership. If you just think someone's just going to come in and woo the crowd for a day, and that's it, and your job's done in terms of leadership in the area that they're talking on, then that's pretty poor leadership. So it's about thinking on how the people that are in the school are going to continue that drive. And ultimately, it comes down to hearing probably a similar message from another voice. And it's a little bit frustrating, isn't it? Like when somebody comes in and delivers an assembly, say, for example, to our year 11s, and you think, guys, I've been saying that to you for the last 5 years. You know, it's not that they're saying something groundbreaking, but it's hearing it from a different angle or a different tone or a different way. So, yeah, I'm interested in kind of discussing your viewpoints on the impact of that and how we can make that really, really beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say there about, that year 11 where you've been saying the same things over and over again and the message hasn't got across to them. I think that is really true with staff. And I was talking about that we can sometimes get a little bit insular. And so then hearing that from someone else with different experiences, but then how it relates to potentially your school, that can make a difference to how we think about it, and it can be, and I use the term sort of disruptive or challenge, and I mean that in a really positive way, because you can have kind of positive disruption and positive challenge, and I think that's kind of what I like in that aspect of it, that it can just shift your thinking slightly and shake you up a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, and the thing about hearing a message from somebody else psychologically is common as part of our human psyche. If you think of our parents telling us to do X, Y, Z continually, and then an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor or someone else that we kind of just might listen to in a slightly different way says exactly the same thing, yet suddenly our mindset shifts around that. So I think I don't know the psychology around it, but I think there is something in that, in hearing something similar, but from a different angle maybe, or from a different perspective.
I absolutely get that.
Which kind of ties into the whole one-off CPD delivery slot thing, because it depends. So I always say good CPD should involve ideas, time to think, and expertise. And I've kind of prefaced all of my CPD sessions around that. So people don't want to sit there and just hear somebody talk at them for a whole day. Nobody wants to do that. And I know that because I'm a teacher working 4 days a week. So if I sit through a CPD session that's like that, I would be one that would be very uncomfortable with it, and I would struggle just maybe to even sit still for that long. So you need ideas. You need something that will actually invigorate me into thinking, how am I going to change my habits? And then good CPD should integrate time. And this is where, again, the leadership element comes into it. So I've worked with hundreds of schools where I say, look, we need to build in time throughout the day where the subjects or the areas or the groups or whoever I'm speaking to have time to integrate those ideas that we've just talked about. Not just then saying, off you go and try to fit them in however you can amongst your lessons, because that won't happen. And then finally, good CPD should be delivered by somebody with forms of expertise. So I heard you mention earlier that I deliver in a variety of areas, but I've turned down tons of requests where I say, sorry, that's not my expertise. Sorry, that's not an area that I would never claim I'm an expert, but I'd claim that I have expertise in certain area. So it frustrates me often when you read tweets or you see requests from people saying, look, I've got to deliver a CPD session on XYZ. Has anybody got any stuff that I could use to deliver it on? Now, there's twofold to that. Yeah, you might just want to compare your notes and maybe, improve or whatever. That's cool, no problem. But if it's, I've never delivered on this and I don't really know what this is, but I have to talk to it, then we're missing that third element of effective CPD. So they might provide ideas, they might provide time, but are they providing expertise? And that's an element that we need to be clear about in effective CPD.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've got a certain sympathy with those tweets that I sometimes see where people are saying, I've been asked to deliver on literacy. Anybody got anything that I can look at? Because that tends to be from people who aren't necessarily coming from outside, but it tends to be that person who looked willing or didn't look the other way when somebody was asking for volunteers in the staff room.
It comes down to leadership again, doesn't it? It's like, what are we aiming to get out of this CPD session? Are we just trying to plug a hole, or are we actually trying to upskill and improve incrementally and developmentally our teachers? So it's thinking about how we're piecing together those CPD sessions. And one of the things that I do as soon as I start at a school, because obviously nobody knows who the hell you are. So you just say very, very clearly, look, I work 4 days a week in a school. You list what subject you teach, you list what phase you teach in, how long you've been teaching, And it's interesting when you reference the fact that I'm actually currently still doing this.
Mm.
And that kind of, I see a visible sigh of relief, which I know brings two debates to this equation. Like, you know, does it matter if you're not doing it right now? How long until you haven't done it, until you become stale in inverted commas? And all of those kind of questions come about. But overwhelmingly, the feedback that I get is it feels like you're talking from a position as us. And that's interesting because that reception of that CPD then changes somewhat, rather than someone that is delivering on an area that you're saying to, say, for example, behavior management is the most interesting one. And they will say, well, have you had to deal with this XYZ situation yourself in the last, I don't know, 5 years? And then it opens up a kind of whole kind of quiet storm around the necessity to be doing it practically or knowing it theoretically or both.
Yeah. And, I think Mark said, it drives him mad exactly to kind of have that, can you just come and deliver it? But that point you make about the authenticity, the fact that you're doing it is something that I've had to grapple with myself, because obviously I'm not in the classroom now. Despite having, worked in school since 1997, making me feel really, really old. And it's a question that I ask, and it's, especially we're having people experience COVID and what happened in lockdown there. And I would sometimes get asked, can you deliver something on remote teaching? I can remember being asked that about 3 weeks in to the lockdown, and it's like, and myself and a colleague of mine, we both absolutely said absolutely not, because we haven't been doing it. And I can give you certain tips and ideas around teaching generally, but I haven't been sat there with a class of 30 students at the other end of their laptops trying to navigate the technology, trying to navigate how do we turn things from kind of the classroom world, which was very familiar, to being the other side of the screen. And so I've kind of walked away from that in the past.
But I think there's a multitude of kind of areas that need to be addressed via CPD. So, for example, I've seen obviously your latest upcoming book on teaching Shakespeare and those elements. Like, I don't think personally it makes any difference if you're not currently doing that. If you've spent a long time doing that, then the theory and the rationales behind it are concrete. So I wouldn't have any issues with someone like yourself coming in and saying, look, I've taught Shakespeare for 20 years, and this is how you can really make it come alive. However, if you had somebody delivering a CPD session on, say, for example, our favorite differentiation or scaffolding, and then saying, no, but you need to do this and this and this, and you're sat there going, but I've got 45% send in my class, and I've got 28% people premium with another 20% of those that are EAL, I don't think you quite understand what that looks like for me doing that day in, day out.
Yeah.
They are kind of quite distinct, and those kind of areas are interesting. And then you've got the whole kind of debate around, obviously I deliver anti-racism training as well, and is it appropriate for someone that's not from a BAME background to deliver anti-racism training? And that's another kind of debate. And then you've got the same debate around, should someone like me, who would be categorized as neurotypical, be delivering training on, say, neurodivergences such as autism or ADHD or dyslexia? And then so it spans out quite wide, but ultimately it comes down to those three things. I feel: ideas, time to think, and expertise. If you could demonstrate those three things, you can really delve into an effective and productive CPD session.
Fantastic. What I'm going to do, if that's okay with you, Amjad, I'm going to go to the news, and then I want to come back to your kind of point about authenticity and who you are, because I know that you're very well known, but at the same time, I just want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your context, your experiences, and some of the kind of expertise that you have and the areas you cover. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. In that time, I'm going to try to go and rename myself, and then I'll call back in.
It was very, very confusing for me there for a minute. All right, and here's the news.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
Introducing UpLearn. UpLearn is an online curriculum learning resource for A-levels that improves student outcomes whilst reducing teacher workloads. Teachers use UpLearn to facilitate independent learning and consolidation of classroom material. Over 150 schools have seen grade improvements with UpLearn, including St Paul's Girls' School, Michaela Community School and ARC schools. Book a demo at uplearn.co.uk and quote TTR for 10% off. That's UpLearn, uplearn.co.uk.
Whatever learning looks like this year, bring lessons to life with Nearpod. An exciting new addition to the Renaissance family, Nearpod offers real-time insights into student understanding through interactive lessons and videos, gamification and activities, all in a single, easy-to-use platform. To help kickstart the new year, we're offering all primary and secondary schools in the UK and Ireland full free access to Nearpod for the whole spring term. So, no matter what 2022 brings, Nearpod makes switching between in-class and remote teaching simple. Visit www.renlearn.co.uk/Nearpod and sign up for your free trial today.
If you're listening to this, then we know we share one thing in common: a passion for the type of outstanding education that every child deserves. That's what makes us the leading provider of specialist education and care. We need people like you to help us achieve even more. With us, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and be rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. We are Witherslack Group. If you'd like to find out more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers and be part of our future.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Perpetrators are finding new ways to groom and abuse younger children, including through social media and dating apps, according to a report by the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. The inquiry, chaired by Professor Alexis Jay, concluded that local authorities and police forces are struggling to keep pace with the changing nature of child sexual exploitation. The report warned that there is a false assumption that exploitation by organised networks is on the wane. Professor Jay previously investigated abuse in Rotherham and said that there may also be a fear that places will be labelled another Rotherham or another Rochdale. The report found that child sexual exploitation has now become a hidden problem, in danger of being underreported. 6 areas were focused on as a part of the inquiry: St Helens, Tower Hamlets, Swansea, Durham, Bristol and Warwickshire. They are areas that have not already been subject to investigations into CSE. The report emphasises that too many victims of child sexual exploitation are treated as offenders, and states that more effort must be made to prosecute perpetrators effectively. The report makes 6 recommendations, including improving the identification of and the response to child sexual exploitation. Professor Jay said, "The sexual exploitation of children by networks is not a rare phenomenon and not confined to a small number of areas, and that all agencies, including education, should be alert to the signs." According to a report in The Guardian, 1 in 8 primary pupils in England had COVID last week. Figures released on Friday by the Office for National Statistics suggest that infections may now have peaked in primary age pupils, but the surge continues to cause disruption to attendance. Prevalence also remains high amongst secondary schools, with an infection rate in England of 1 in 15. The Department for Education has launched its new Education Staff Wellbeing Charter, which applies to staff in England. On the government website are details of the declaration of support for and sets of commitments to the well-being and mental health of everyone working in education. All state-funded schools and colleges are invited to sign up to the Charter, and the website has links to a range of resources. An article on the Daily Monitor website discusses fire safety in schools in Uganda following a fire at a school in Kawempe in January. The fire broke out in the girls' dormitories and left 4 pupils dead and 3 seriously injured. The Ugandan National Fire Protection Association reports that around 5,000 fires occur in institutions of learning each year. Many are now calling for a greater focus on fire safety to prevent loss of life, damage to property, and disruption to learning. This should include installing firefighting equipment in schools and clear identification of escape routes, as well as smoke detectors and fire alarms. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio Weekend News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week we're going to take a look at teaching online. Marmite comes to mind when I think about teaching online. I actually like it, but it's my job and I'm surrounded by gadgets to assist me. A lot of teachers hate it. If you think about it, for 90% of the current population of teachers, delivering a lesson online is something they've not even been trained in. They signed up to be in the classroom with a group of pupils. I'm not going to go into the depths of the delivery platform. That's normally a choice that's already made for you by technology leaders in schools. I'm going to give you a couple of free tools that work in a browser, so don't need installing and can be used for engagements in the classroom and easily adapted to use online. First up, we all love Kahoot. Did you know you can set a Kahoot to be self-paced rather than live? Simply click the Assign button and you have an instant self-paced quiz for a homework, a starter, or a progress check. If you need to take it online, share the link and off you go. If you use lots of YouTube clips and websites, check out Wakelet. Share collections of links in a meaningful way for free. My favourite use for this is to group my YouTube clips for topics. Not only are they played back with less distractions, but I can share a group of links for revision or to flip a lesson. Again, if I have to teach online, one link can lead to many. Just remember to check your school's policy on using websites such as YouTube for online teaching. If you have access to devices in the classroom, why not try Mentimeter? Create interactive presentations, take votes or build word clouds from participants' answers to improve engagement, assess learning and inspire discussion. Or, if you love whiteboards, try whiteboard.fi. As a teacher, you can see all your class's whiteboards and answers, know who's interacting and who's not. You can even show a QR code for ease of joining. I could go on and on. The idea is to test these things out when you're with your class and there's no pressure. Then, should you need to teach online, you'll feel more comfortable, there'll be fewer issues, and most importantly, you'll see if pupils are engaging. I hope you consider bringing a bit of tech into your classroom. As always, please test things work in your setting before you use them. For a visual version of this episode, check out the TT Radio 2022 Twitter feed. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello again. There I was playing with the tech and it was still threatening to go wrong, but I think I just about caught it. Zoe Enser here, talking to Amjad Ali about CPD and the CPD provided from outside of your school. Really interesting discussion so far. There's a comment that came from Twitter where they're agreeing with Amjad's point about not listening to people within your local setting. Reminds me of not being a prophet in your own land. People take for granted what they're familiar with, and I think that's true. You know, this person yet again telling us about how to do this, and all of a sudden somebody new comes in, a new voice, a new way of approaching it, and it doesn't have to be revolutionary and different in what they're actually saying in terms of the content, but how they're approaching it. It makes it quite different. Now, we were talking about authenticity. And we were talking about that credibility and the idea of, that person standing in front of you being able to say that they're walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and my own feelings around my position at the moment with that. And I was going to give Amjad an opportunity to talk about his own context a little bit and a bit about his journey in teaching and what he does and where his expertise lies. Thank you for coming back.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Often a question that I get asked is, how did you get into delivering CPD 1 day a week? Kind of, how did you make that decision? And I guess it all stemmed from, so back in the day, some of us will remember what an advanced skills teacher was.
Yeah.
So I become an AST in teaching and learning, or, it was trendy to be called learning and teaching then. And part of the package of that advanced skills teacher role was the local authority would buy a day a week from your school and then send you over to the various local authority schools and deliver CPD in different areas within the framework of teaching and learning. However, when the new government come into post, they scrapped the advanced skills teacher role. But lots of those schools that I'd worked with got in touch with me directly and said, Amjad, can you still come and deliver CPD? And I was like, I don't know. Am I allowed to? I'm not sure. They were like, yeah, it's no problem. We'll just pay you direct and we'll just sort it out with your school, or you sort it out with your school and whatnot. So that's where kind of the initial startup of delivering CPD stemmed from. And then it just kind of widened into when I got my first senior leadership job. I discussed the kind of need of allowing some flexibility in me being able to deliver CPD. And the school was very accommodating by blocking my timetable on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I had a Monday and a Friday available to be able to do that. And then my current school, which was a startup school, we're in year 5 of the startup school journey now. I secured a 0.8 position with them right from the outset to make it clear that I do this and this is what I enjoy doing. The context of my school is interesting. We have lots of people that have worked in startup schools will know that you get a well above national average influx of students with special educational needs and disabilities, because they haven't had the worry or the concern or any prior experience of the school not doing well enough for them or their siblings before or whatnot. So you get a lot of intake around the SEND needs, and I absolutely love that. I'm a Senko by trade as well, so that's part and parcel of my kind of package and what I do. But lots of what I've been delivering CPD on has always been about encapsulating the needs of quality first teaching or teaching to the best standard. So being a Senko and the teaching and learning lead is really powerful, because you don't need to fight with one or the other person in asking for slots on the CPD calendar, because you're designing the CPD calendar yourself, and designing things whilst being the pupil premium lead, ensuring that those areas are fundamental in the CPD delivery and the CPD package is really, really helpful and really, really powerful. Too many schools that I work in or seen or work around, you have the Senko saying, if only the teaching and learning lead would involve this, and the teaching and learning lead saying, if only the Senko would integrate this. And you're just like, it's a one and only job, work together in ensuring those things can happen. But then, as you know, in schools, we run the risks of being masters of our own islands and worrying solely about our areas of responsibility and not seeing the kind of overlapping link between your role and someone else's role and their role. And that might be due to the accountability agenda. But yeah, so it just kind of, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and it all kind of originated from my free website that I set up years ago on a blogger platform, where in my first school I worked in, I had the idea that I said, well, if we all shared one idea, there's 100 teachers here, we'll have 100 ideas to dip into. Obviously, that didn't quite happen, and I ended up just adding tons of ideas myself. But I thought theoretically it was a really simple thing to do, right? I thought everyone just had one idea, and that would be cool. But it was on a tech platform, having to do something that people aren't used to, and that kind of helped shape my then further delivery. And then from that, people were like, okay, this is good. Can you explain this a bit more? And I was like, oh, I'd be happy to come in and talk about it. And yeah, so I've just been doing that for the last 8-9 years, one day a week. And it's interesting how it's morphed. So during COVID, it morphed into webinars and online conferences, etc. So working with Jennifer Webb and Emma Kate, we set up, massively successful events such as Primary Essentials and ECT Essentials and Teaching and Learning Essentials. And then the pre-recorded element of CPD has been absolutely incredible at the moment as well, where schools are asking for bespoke CPD sessions that staff can dip into, but you've got to follow those criteria for me, which is ideas, time to think, and expertise. And kind of that's where I am now. On a Friday, I do that one day a week, and I kind of work for myself. I choose who I can work with. And I know Mark asked a question, what's the kind of weirdest thing that
Yeah.
you've been asked to deliver CPD on? And once I got asked to deliver CPD, obviously I'm not going to mention schools or anything like that.
No.
Once I got asked to deliver CPD on a specific PowerPoint that had been made for me, and they gave me a script.
Oh.
And I said, I'm really sorry. Can't you just do that yourself? And they were like, no, we want someone else to say it. I was like, I can't do that. These aren't my words. These aren't what I would say. So I'm sorry. But equally,
That's bizarre.
yeah. I mean, I had a weirder one where school said to me, none of our teachers use PowerPoints or whiteboards or screens. We don't believe in that. We believe in effective exposition of information, etc. And I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. But yet 3 weeks before my CPD session, they asked me to email the PowerPoint in advance. And I thought, hold on, why do you need the PowerPoint? And they said, well, we kind of want to read it ahead. And I went, doesn't that kind of apply to your students as well? And they didn't get the link. So
No,
I didn't
a
go
bit
to
of
that
a
school.
connect there, isn't there?
Yeah, so I just thought maybe I won't attend that one either.
There's loads of points I want to pick up on what you've said there. I think, what you were saying in terms of that collective responsibility around teaching and learning and the Senko role and it all should mesh together. And obviously your role, you're able to do that. But you're right, people do end up working in silos and it does kind of have that line of responsibility. And it's important to have an element of responsibility, who's the person
Absolutely,
you can go to. But I've had similar when I was first picking up on CPD. They wanted to keep it kind of as a separate thing from teaching and learning, and I really struggled with that concept. That somebody can be responsible for teaching and learning, and somebody else can be responsible for CPD, and that to me felt a little bit like I could be an events organizer, as opposed to the person who was involved and that kind of collective work as a leadership team. It was important that we all thought about what was it that we needed to develop, as opposed to it kind of being sat, one idea over there, one idea over here, because then that doesn't allow everyone to be moving forward and to have that same vision and that same message and purpose. So I think it's interesting that you're in that position to be able to knit things together there in that way. That's really good.
I don't think that's too different from lots of schools currently either, in terms of, because the CPD kind of area of responsibility comes with potentially a significant budget. The kind of differences or the separation of those two areas is often made. And I think also CPD is often seen as two distinct elements, which is fascinating, because I don't think you and I would agree with this, because some people see CPD as the kind of wider development of an individual, say, for example, in their leadership areas, say, for example, MPQSL, MPQML, and all of those kind of things. Or CPD is seen as the upskilling of teachers in an area of target or responsibility that the school needs to work on. Yet we know that those two things are synonymous with each other in terms of developing the school in a wider area. But yeah, I think that still happens in terms of the upskilling of teachers. And you all have delivered CPD where you all have people that will sit there and say, I already know all of this, and why am I here? And I don't think, as Lord Jim Knight said, the moment a teacher stops learning is the moment a student stops learning. So I don't think all of us can ever get to the position where we go, no, I fundamentally know this. And it's fascinating because schools that I deliver CPD on, teachers will say, I've read so-and-so's book, or I've done so-and-so's, I've heard so-and-so's podcast, or I've been on so-and-so's blog. And it's just like, okay, but have we changed our habits in what we're doing? And how have we done that? And that's where the kind of the long-term validity of CPD needs to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often worry about the term in itself. We're CPD, CPL, CPDL, PD, and the different terms that are around. And I often do come back to that. Yes, it can seem like semantics, but thinking of ourselves as learners and thinking about kind of building our knowledge and our understanding, and then taking that forward. I don't know. I'm entirely happy with CPD being able to encapsulate that. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I think the way we think about ourselves and our own development really does matter.
Absolutely. And I think one of the wider issues with CPD involves this kind of distinct uniqueness of it. So it's me as a professional, as part of my career, I deserve to be enhanced and develop, if I choose to, if I want to, of course. But equally, us as a profession, so collectively, we need to be ensuring that we know and we're delivering and we are doing the most efficient and effective and the best possible job. And that's where the overlap becomes quite difficult, because, you know, I've written blogs about I used to think, but now I know. Yeah, I track back to when I first started teaching 15, 16 years ago, and I was teaching A-level law, and I had students that still went to Oxford or Cambridge, and I was thinking, but if I taught those students now, I wouldn't use any of those teaching practices, yet still they performed and they did exceptionally well. And so did it come down to the basic crux of just really clear delivery and effective relationships and ensuring that you believed in them, the Pygmalion effect and all of those kind of things? Or did it come down to the fact that I knew or I didn't know cognitive science as much as I potentially know now? And that's where it becomes complicated, because you'll have teachers that say, well, I've never heard of this cognitive load theory, for example. Yeah, I've still done really well with my students. And it's just like, that's cool, because maybe you've developed really efficient habits from the outset in ensuring that those things don't happen. And I think the worry is when schools stick labels on things and go to another session and then try to drop it back into a school. That's when it becomes slightly problematic.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not a fan of that. You know, I'm going to pick that up because I've seen it work here, and I'm just going to lay it over the top of my school, and that's magically going to happen. We're all just going to do this, and we're going to have a nice little sort of tick list around it. And I'm yet to, you know, prove me wrong. You know, if there are people out there who have been really successful in that, fantastic, and let me know. But I'm yet to see that being really effective. And what you see is things being shoehorned. This is where we get the kind of mutations coming in as well, because there hasn't been an understanding. You get lots of resentment, understandably, because you know somebody, you know, we're just going to all do this way now, and everyone's got to do it.
And obviously, our favorite phrase around that is a non-negotiable. You know, when was it ever negotiated for it to become a non-negotiable? So, you know, it's like, you know, and as English teachers, you and I know that you could reword things that will still have that same effect. So, for example, in my school, we call them visible consistencies, which is a non-threatening version of saying, look, we want everyone to do this together because it makes a difference, as opposed to you will do this because this is what we told you to do. And as Sean Allison and Andy Tharby say in their Making Every Lesson Count book, it's a tight but loose model. We have to give an element of professional ownership to the subjects, to the specific mechanics within the school. So tight in the sense of, for example, we want all subjects to do a retrieval task at the start of the lesson, for example, but loose in the sense of what does that look like for your subject? Is that the same as MFL, English, history, PE, music, dance? And so allowing for that professional development enables that. But equally, you know, us sitting in those other areas, if we are given too much kind of freedom around things, we revert back to our habits and then just continue doing what we've always done. So that's where leadership comes in, isn't it? It's the change management theory and bringing people on board and all of those kind of things.
Indeed, it is, and you know, I'm a bit obsessed with sort of teacher habits and pupil habits actually, and how that links to motivation, because when you're trying to change something, it is really hard, and we need to support and scaffold people to be able to do that, and then that in turn will help them to feel more motivated to be able to take that forward themselves. But it's knowing when to kind of scaffold and when to pull back, and we do that all the time with students, and I don't know that we've always got that balance right with staff, and sometimes we're kind of pushing too hard in one direction, or sometimes we're, you know, just kind of backing away, and it feels a bit, you know, particularly if you're new to the profession, it's like, oh yeah, you know, just do what you feel, and that's not going to work. You know, there will be some that are successful, but you know, it's really tough, and people get really overwhelmed quickly. with lots of decisions like that. So they do need that support. And you're right, it comes back, and I'm really passionate about that. I think that there needs to be a real element of CPD in development that's kind of owned by the staff on the ground, but they need to know that it's really supported and valued by those people above and the leaders, and that we're giving them some direction and some focus around that.
And I remember when I led on CPD a couple of years ago, we were, and quite a few schools I think moved into this direction where we gifted a day's CPD to all colleagues if they took CPD into their own hands, and say, for example, went to a women ed event, a BAME ed event, went to a research ed event, and then we had a day just before the Easter holidays where if staff gave up a day elsewhere or kind of did a course online or XYZ, we said, no, have a day off because you've taken CPD into your own hands. And I think, again, that's great, but it's how do we then move into the change in habit? So I use kind of buzzy phrases that I've been going on and on about that I've repeated over and over in sessions that I deliver. So the 3 words that I go on and on about are try, refine, ditch. So I always tell people, when you're listening to this CPD session, what will you now try? What will you pick up that is low effort and high impact? Based on Mary Myatt's words, low effort, high impact. And then what will you refine? Because there'll be lots of ideas that you're sitting there thinking, I used to do that. I knew about that. I've heard of that. I've done that before you were born, son. And it's just like, yeah, okay. So how are you going to refine that and bring that back into your practice? And finally, just as crucial as a try, what will you now ditch? What will you now not do any longer? And I kind of make a point of saying your try and ditch have to be balanced, because otherwise you're going to have too much of one and it's not going to result in a effective change. And then ultimately, accounting for the time, I direct how I ask them to implement their intentions. So I would say to them, I now need you to fill in your try, refine, ditch document. I now need you to bullet point your try, refine, ditch document. And then towards the end of the day, we go into, what does this look like? Short term, medium term, and long term. So 3, 2, 1, 3 short term, 2 medium term, 1 long term. And eventually just dipping in those ideas of we're working towards 1 tweak a week. It makes it less threatening. It makes it less worrying. It makes people think that actually this is something I could do. And ultimately, the biggest trick that, and I use the word trick on purpose, the biggest trick that we can do as CPD deliverers is make people feel like it was their idea in the first place. And by them doing so, they won't think they're doing more work. And that's ultimately where we need to get them to be. Where do we want them to change their habits? Because no one, and I think you'll agree with this, no one ever has sat through your CPD sessions and thought, Zoe, you're making total sense. Everything you're saying is valid. I need to do this. This will make a difference for my students, but I'm just not going to do it because I can't be bothered. Yeah. They sit there because they're thinking, I don't know how I could possibly do this or put this in place or make this happen because I'm so swamped with XYZ. So that's where the ditch element needs to come in.
I have to say, sometimes when you talk in terms like that and you've got a whole staff there and there are leaders there, there is a little flash in some leaders, not all, but some leaders' eyes at the idea that you're suddenly saying to staff, what are you not going to do? Because they're thinking everything needs to be done at the same time. But that's a conversation we keep coming back to in the profession, isn't it? We can't do everything. We can't just pile on more. We've got to think about, as you say, refine it. And I talk all the time, particularly when I'm talking about things like generative learning, about it being tools in our toolkit, and whether that's principles of effective instruction from Rose and Shine, or whether it's generative learning, or whether it's a different, even sort of the Teach Like a Champion. These are tools, and those tools need to be sharpened. And we do all want to, be able to work more effectively and efficiently. We don't want to have to work hard, and that comes back to that motivation. And if people see the cost as well as the value, then that makes it much easier for the connections to happen. Joe's sort of mentioned as well that she had some training this week, and they did the same idea with the keep it, tweak it, bin it, and she really liked that. So I think that's probably emanated out from your work there, Amjad.
the thing that's interesting is, you said the win thing of a leader thinking, oh, what are you going to ask them to bin? And that's where the pre-work needs to come in.
Yeah.
Very rarely does a CPD day involve someone just saying, Amjad, can we book you in for the 15th of January? See you then. That pre-work needs to happen. Can I read your teaching and learning policy? Do you have a feedback policy? Shall we talk about the behavior policy? Who's in charge of this? Who can I have a discussion with? This is what I would like to share, and these are the ideas, and this is what it's based on. Does that conflict with anything that you're talking on? And so having those professional conversations prior to the CPD day is really powerful, because then if you're empowered to enable the teachers to say, no, I am going to ditch this, that will really drive forward change.
Yeah. And I was, I'm really interested in that pre-work, because I find that it can be really tricky, because often it's I want to meet and explore it, and you've got this 30-minute remote session, and you're relying on them really, they've got to know their stuff. They've got to know why they are asking you to come in, how it all fits together. They've got to do some of the groundwork with staff as well, as opposed to, and now we have this person who's going to talk to you. So there needs to be a lead in there, and ideally, as you say, really already enmeshed in the work that's happening in the school. So it isn't, this person's coming in and suddenly we're changing a direction, or we're looking at something that we've never really considered before. And I think that doesn't make for a good session. And they also really need to know their staff. They really need to know, where their staff are at, and be able to give you those opportunities. No point saying that they know everything. They're really, really hot on modelling. They've been doing that, but I just want you to spend a little bit of time on that. And all of a sudden you've got people there going, well, I never model. I don't do it in my class. It's not something that's part of what my everyday practice is. And I haven't really considered it before. You're going to have to change tack quite quickly. And luckily, those experiences are very few, at least from my experience. Any tips you've got for me on how to get the best out?
I think that opens up kind of two areas. So there's one where there'll be schools that you alluded to there that will say, actually, we're really good at this, and our staff do this, and then they won't see a need for CPD in those areas. So lots of schools that are maybe really high performing or have done well with their students, etc., in various guises, will say, actually, we don't need CPD session on this because we're all okay. But then, like you said, how do we actually know? Do we see that? Is that the case? And then you'll have other schools that will have new senior leaders, people that have just come into role. There'll be really troubling, challenging circumstances. And we'll say, we'll use the phrase a lot, we need some quick wins. And I'm not a fan of quick wins, low-hanging fruit and all that. But, you can give a staff body some really effective, low-effort, high-impact strategies that they could build habits around that will make a tangible difference to their practice. And I guess that's where our experience needs to come in a little as well, because, for example, if someone calls you in to deliver CPD and they're new in post, that's where you need to kind of lead on that and say, actually, for teachers, this will be really beneficial. Tell me about your demographic, tell me about your context. Let's think about how we could personalize that. But I guess that's where our experience comes in as well, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And I think that point you made about the quick wins, again, that's about motivation as well, because the same with students. We want to show them that there is something that they can achieve, there's something they can do, and that they can then build on that. And staff need to see that sometimes. It isn't out, completely out of their reach. It's a bit like when you look at those sessions, and I can remember sitting in some of the sessions that were run by the local authority way back in the day when it was a lot of national strategy, and they'd do a lot on guided reading and guided writing. And every time they'd put that video up, and I think back now and I think, well, I've done that. It does work. But they do these guided reading and writing sessions, and you'd have this perfect class where the teacher was working with 3 or 4 students at the front in a small group and doing this really intense session of intervention with them, and everything else was perfect. And I can guarantee 90% of the room that I was in that were watching that would be going, yeah, but I can't do that in my school. I can't do that in my setting. It feels impossible. Yes, that might be fantastic, but it's an impossible dream. And I think, Joe said, when you can be really motivated to put something to practice, but then you're asked, not to do that because of consistency. That can be another challenge. So she's come to your session, seen something amazing, but that doesn't quite fit.
So I've got a couple of kind of things that you can challenge areas around that. So I get that a lot. So people will say, Amjad, haven't listened to you. We want to then go back to school and say this, but they say, no, we don't do this because of this. So I always say to people, use this phrase. And I think it's a bit of a foolproof phrase, but obviously, let's see how it goes for everyone, which is ask the senior leaders or ask the line managers or ask whoever's saying no and say the following phrase to them: can I trial this and feed it back to you? And it's very difficult for somebody to say no. Why would I want you to trial something that could potentially be more beneficial for our young people and outcomes, and then you feed back to me to then see whether we can move it forward or not, rather than just saying, well, I know some people have gone wrong and they've gone, actually so and so says you need to do this, and that then brings a whole ego element into ideas. And people then get their ego hurt and say, actually, this is my idea, my policy, my framework, I've worked hard on this, and we need to let go of the ego around those things. And if people say, actually, and the language we use in my school especially is that if you feel that there's something more efficient and more effective in doing what we want to achieve, then let's talk about it, let's do it. So when we first started, we had a marking policy. The head of English took that marking policy, met with all of the other middle leaders and turned it into a feedback policy and said, this is what we think is beneficial for our subjects and our classes and our students. And me, as a new senior leader, was like, brilliant, you've just done what I needed to have done better anyway for me. So it's great, no problem. And there's buy-in already there and all of those kind of things. So, let me trial it and feed it back to you. But equally, we need to, as leaders, not assign ideas attached to our egos. We need to just say, this is efficient, effective. If it isn't, then let's let it go.
I really like that, and I think it's always an important reminder that we need to park our egos. We need to kind of think more broadly about what we're trying to achieve, and we do. We've all got the same aims. We want the right things for our students. We want to make a difference to their lives, and I'm also, I feel quite seen with that phrase that you shared there, because anyone who's ever line managed me, I don't know if they'll listen back to this show, they will know that idea of trial or pilot and feedback. I've used that a lot over the years, and it is really effective. And I'm, when I'm saying I want to explore something, I'm not saying it's going to have all the answers, but having that freedom, that opportunity to try something out, and even if it doesn't quite work, we learn a lot through that process.
Absolutely.
And so having that opportunity to do that, and there can be a tension in schools, I suppose, around that, because at the same time people think, well, these students, this is their shot at education, we can't go messing around too much. But if it just makes a difference and a change that is positive to them at the end, we're not going to just suddenly go, well, I'm not going to teach them. That's my pilot. That's my trial I'm going to use.
It's not going to do that anymore. Yeah,
absolutely. Mark has a question, because he likes to throw questions in just to be awkward. Hang on, I was going to invite him as a speaker, but I don't think we need to hear him as well here this morning, do we? I was wondering how schools decide who can't deliver good quality CPD for their staff, so their sort of decision making process. What should leaders look out for, and what might the red flags be that might suggest that isn't the direction they want to go in? I think that's an interesting one. What do you think?
It's a fascinating question, and I remember kind of earlier on in my leadership days where we would have those lesson observation performers where I would have two columns: CPD need or CPD lead. So say, for example, I have observed Mark in his geography lesson, and I thought, you know what, this bit where he's really probing and he's pushing students to elicit their answers further, he can lead CPD on this. I would tick a box on that. And then we would bring that together and we would compile our CPD agenda using the in-house strengths that we have. Equally, if I then went and observed another teacher and I thought, you know what, this teacher really needs CPD on how to probe and elicit deeper levels of understanding around students' learning, we would ask them to attend that CPD session from Mark. So there's different ways that you can do those kind of things. But essentially, my red flag would be, and I don't know if this is a bit broad, but somebody saying, I've just had CPD from someone else. Can I deliver CPD on this now? And I'm not sure that's enough. Or I've just read this book. Can I now deliver CPD on this now? There's ideas you could extrapolate. Of course, there's suggestions, there's things that you could do. But if you've read a book on, say, Rosenshine, could you then deliver a whole session on Rosenshine? I'm not sure. Not straight away. Probably you could deliver how you can extrapolate those 10 Rosenshine principles into what it looks like in the classroom. Yes, but that would be maybe my red flag.
Yeah, I agree totally with that, and we see that often, and again, that's something that I've heard quite a few people at events like Research Ed talk about, where you've come along, it's really, you're excited, it's an exciting atmosphere, everybody's enthusiastic because they've kind of given up their time to come along to that, and then they turn up at their own school on Monday morning and say, right, I'm going to deliver this, and this is what we're all going to be looking at, and you don't want to sort of quash their enthusiasm for an excitement for what they've seen, but they need time to think about it and explore it. And again, sometimes our systems in school where we say you've gone on a course, you've done a session, you've done that reading, and then immediately we want you to deliver something around it, that perhaps is too fast. It needs that time to explore and time to embed and time to revisit. As opposed to straight in there and off you go, and that's what we're now going to look at. Mark says that effective and efficient is a great message. He's bigging up his school again. Caroline Barlow, our SLT, often asks us what we think we could stop doing or what we could do better, and I think that's important. And as leaders, sometimes we don't. Certainly I know that I didn't always stop and pause and ask that question to others. I might stop and ask myself, but I didn't always stop and ask that to other staff. So there's a lesson in that.
And I think just to like kind of wrap up this, I wrote a blog many years ago. Do you even blog? And the reason why I wrote that was because I think so many of us write blogs, and our schools might not even know that we blog. And the same principle applies the other way, where you've got all of these people going out delivering at Research Eds, at Women Eds, at BayMed. People don't know actually how great they are at that either. So it's bringing those people in is just as useful and is just as powerful as well. But ultimately, it comes down to, has this person got maybe a track record in this area? Has this person lived or breathed this area? Has this person shown through previous testimonies or previous outcomes that they are the right person for this area? And, it's very problematic because ultimately I'm a teacher that works in a school that has led in certain areas, that has done it across very different challenging schools. But you have to book someone in basically based on word of mouth. So has a previous leader seen you, heard you, experienced this, and then what has been the potential impact? Because otherwise, where do you start, right, Zoe? Like, at what point does somebody go, you know what, I'm new to this and I really want to do this, but actually I haven't spoken before, but I've done all of this before. And I guess that's the key thing. But you can't get experience until you get experience. So it's difficult.
Yeah, I'm really keen on trying to give people a platform and amplify other voices as well, and getting them to share that, because it can, it becomes that echo chamber, isn't it? The same people that you say, the same voices that are being heard, and it is really important. But you cover that well, sort of Mark's follow-up question, those people from outside, and there is an element of trust there. That we have to put in, but the more we can talk and the more conversations we can have around it, the less likely we are to bring somebody in who just doesn't fit what we're hoping to achieve and our need.
Absolutely. And it's extremely flattering when you get a school that will contact you and say, look, we haven't had an external speaker for 15 years, but we want you to come in. And it's amazing. And I know, for example, I've spoken at Mark's school as well. And so, it's lovely when people see you and they know of your work. And, I don't have a book out yet. And
Yeah, I was going to
it's
say, when's that happening,
yeah,
Amjad?
well, children have been delaying it every time another one comes along, and so yeah, that needs to happen. But it's that idea of, you know, people have this massive assumption about me that I speak at every event, that I'm everywhere, I do this, that. But I'm actually not. I'm actually at very few events and very few kind of situations that people will see the usual faces. But yeah, I'm kind of put into that bracket of, oh, Amjad speaking again. So actually, if you look at where I actually speak at and how often I speak, it's actually not that many places. I do a lot of work behind the scenes of schools, a lot of kind of work that is done, and that's very much same with the Baymed network work that we do. It's, we keep plugging on, and it's not about putting your face out in XYZ way, but the amplification is vital, and hence why, you know, on events that I organize with Jenny and Emma, we always have a new voice, and we always have someone that hasn't been presented before to say, look, there's fantastic people out there. But yeah, Zoe, thank you so much for inviting me to
You have
speak.
been. I know I've kept you much longer than I promised, but it's been so fascinating, and we'll probably carry this on Twitter at some point and pick up some of these points. But thank you so much for giving up your Saturday morning
My
to talk to
pleasure,
me.
and thank you so much for
It's
anyone that's
been
been listening
superb.
and participating. Thank you again. No, definitely.
All right,
We're
take
no doubt
care.
carry on the conversation. Take care now. Bye bye.
Definitely. Bye. Oh, fantastic. I've actually, I've got probably a million and one more questions that I could ask Amjad about that, but I've got quite a few things to walk away from that discussion and think about and consider and think about in terms of my own practice. Personally, I find delivering in schools or talking to other teachers and presenting to other teachers, I learn quite a lot through that experience. And that's one of the things. I get quite nervous about talking to new groups of people. I'm not a particularly confident person, but at the same time, I know that I'm always going to discover something and learn something from those conversations and those reflections. And I think that what I've got to really refine on further is those opportunities to follow up. And sometimes it can be a bit job finished. So you've delivered there for the day, and I always, do some kind of evaluation around it. I will always contact schools later and say, and there's that tension because perhaps they're thinking, oh, she's just touting for more work or something like that. But I want to know how it's going, what's been developed, has it made a difference? What can, again, I learn from that process? What might I need to take back and consider, not just in terms of presenting, but in terms of the thinking and how that school's done that. So that's an area that I'm thinking of and considering. So any ideas around that, I would really appreciate exploring further about the follow up. So I talked quite a lot about the lead in, and Amjad talked quite a lot about that lead in and talking to the leaders and exploring with the leaders. But then what about after? Because it isn't really, for me, job finished, job done. There should be something more and an opportunity to feed into those ongoing discussions. That's why I like at the moment that I'm delivering lots of sessions which aren't one-offs. And I'm really enjoying that because you're starting to develop a relationship with those people and understanding about what that's like. The other day I was delivering something for early career teachers that I've been working with since September. And we had a moment where they asked a practical question about their classroom, and they were having some issues in relation to attention because of their classroom layout. And she turned her camera around, she turned her computer around, and we did a little walk around of her classroom. I've never been in it, but we did a little walk around the classroom, and then myself and the other people in the group, we made some suggestions about what could go forward. So I really like that element of CPD, but and making sure that it's having an impact. And when she comes back next time, we'll talk about the changes that we suggested and whether it made a difference to the attention of the students that she was focusing in on. So lots again for me to think about and lots for me to consider about how I might do things. And I'm really interested to hear of other people's experiences, having a look on Twitter, seeing what they're saying, or again, we have still got a few minutes if anybody would like to call in. I'll just check back through the chat in case I missed anything. That hopefully no questions for Amjad that I may well have missed. Thank you, Joe. We love you on this show because you are always so positive. Yes, Mark, I will speak to you in a few minutes. I don't need you to call into my radio show. I'm sorry if that seems a little bit harsh. Um, and I think I've done okay. I was going to come back to Joe's point, and I'm hoping Joe's still here, about Patrice Bain's version of that kind of follow-on sheet. That what are you going to do with your CPD? And you mentioned that she actually did that at the event, and that you were given some kind of response sheet, some kind of way to collect ideas and think about what you were taking forward. And that sounds really, again, an interesting way to do, because these one-off sessions, they can easily get lost and they can easily kind of sit alone to do that. The next thing I'm going to be exploring in a few weeks' time, I really want to know more about primary. I'm in a very lucky position that I'm going into a lot more primary schools now, working more closely with the primary team at my work. And discussing things from a primary perspective on the MPQ suite that I'm delivering. I had quite a few primary teachers in that session that we were talking, but I'm particularly interested in anyone who's leading CPD in primary schools and finding out how things are different, how they are approaching things, what particular barriers that they have to that. It is sorry, that was just me reading Mark's comment. I'll come back to that in a moment. He's interrupting me again. But I'm really interested in hearing about what's going on in primary in terms of development. And we know that that's quite a hot topic in terms of what Ofsted are asking for in the EIF, and what they're looking for in the inspection framework, and the issues that are presented there. We know that there are different priorities potentially in some primary schools, and also in terms of staffing and timings, things are different. I don't want to make them sound like an alien species or anything like that. I want to know what's working well and what's going well, as well as those barriers and what they're doing to do that. The reason I laugh is that I've got a comment in here. I won't say who it's from. It says, biggest issue other than you being rude is the lack of QA for CPD providers. This was quite a controversial topic when it came up a while ago, that I know that the Chartered College of Teaching was looking at that quality assurance mark. It says, for every Zoe or Amjad, there is someone massively overextending and trying to deliver on things they know sweet FA about. Big issue in leadership. And yeah, again, I've seen lots of conversation recently with the new MP Q suites and qualifications, and who's actually delivering those, and who's leading on those. And I know some providers are, I haven't been inside all of providers, but some providers have worked really hard to do that. But there are still some questions to be raised. Possibly a role for the new Institute of Teaching. Again, that might be a slightly controversial comment there, but we will see how that goes and where we'll take it. So thank you so much for joining me today and listening and sending in your comments, those constructive comments that came in and those good questions that came in. The others, you know who you are. But later today, we've got Emma Williams, who's coming in for our Saturday brunch show, and then Joseph Hammond taking you into lunch, Mary Okello and Miss Saeed into the evening slots. So there's lots to listen to and lots to look forward to. Have an absolutely lovely Saturday. The sun has come out. I'm very excited that there's actually sunshine coming through the window and some warmth here. So maybe things are turning, maybe things are changing. But I will catch you on Twitter and have a conversation. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.